Now, programming from the Illinois Channel, an independent, nonpartisan corporation formed to provide nonpartisan coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. For more information on the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.
Just ahead, Senator Christine Radogno, the Republican leader in the Illinois Senate, talks at the City Club of Chicago about the continuing budget problems facing the state. Then in about 35 minutes from now, we go one-on-one with Dan Long, director of the Government Forecasting and Accountability Agency that provides economic data to the legislature. We get his analysis of the economic challenges facing the state over the next several years. And in about 1 hour and 5 minutes from now, we hear speeches delivered before the Illinois Gun Owners Lobby Day Conference as they gather for the first time since the passage of the concealed carry law in Illinois. That's all just ahead after this brief note.
The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members, leaders in business, education, law, medicine, and other fields from across Illinois.
Hi, I'm Tony Pawlowski, Executive Director for the ARC of Illinois. We fight for the rights and needs for 220,000 infants, children, and adults with intellectual and other developmental disabilities and their families. With a bit of support, people with developmental disabilities can live a full life in the community. This is accomplished in a variety of ways, such as being included in their neighborhood schools alongside their non-disabled friends, being supported to live in their own homes instead of being locked away in institutions. Diversity makes our community better. And the good news, doing the right thing, investing in community supports, also saves taxpayers money. In fact, it costs taxpayers about half as much to support people with disabilities in community homes where they're better cared for than it costs to have them housed in institutions. Advancing positive public policy by supporting the development of community services best serves the needs of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This is our greatest goal, developing inclusive communities so everyone can live a full life in the community. That's why I'm so proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. At its core, politics is about people and their needs. And the Illinois Channel's coverage of our issues allow us to tell the story of people with disabilities and their families, not in a quick soundbite, but in full unedited interview in which our parents can tell their story, what they want for their child with a disability, and why they were concerned about what the state was doing. Isn't that the kind of coverage we all want of politics? Coverage that ties us to the issues that really matter and in a way that doesn't shortchange the ability of those impacted to get their message out. I'm Tony Pawlowski, Executive Director of the ARC of Illinois and a proud member of the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel, it keeps us connected to the issues that matter the most.
Next, from the City Club of Chicago, we hear an address by Senator Christine Radogno, the Republican leader in the Illinois Senate. She discusses the current fiscal challenges facing the state and why Senate Republicans are opposed to extending the increase in the state income tax that is currently set to expire in January 2015. This runs about 30 minutes.
We all know Chris Radogno very well, and we appreciate here at the City Club that she comes regularly and gives her report on what's happening in Springfield. She also files a clinical diagnosis as a former licensed, practicing social worker. She knows all of the pathologies that are present down there. She notes them with detail, but that's privileged and we're not going to discuss it. I've had the privilege of getting to know Chris over the last 15 years. And if Springfield sometimes sounds like a crazy place or a circus or, over in Michigan they call Lansing the zoo, right? We know that Chris and the Republicans in the state Senate are distinguished by the extent to which they've got their feet on solid soil. And I'll just tell you a quick story. There is nothing happier, I think, from Facebook and those things, than to see what really matters to people. And I became a Facebook friend of Chris's, and probably most of you are as well, but just a couple of weeks ago, the joy that came from her on the entry into this world of these two real new, I would say, they're kind of the new CEOs of her world. Her granddaughters, Sloan and Reese, have taken over her heart and her life, and it is clear from the photos she's posting that our speaker, the Republican leader of the Illinois Senate, is someone with both feet planted firmly on the ground, not just for her grandchildren, but for our grandchildren. And that's why we look forward to her remarks. A big welcome for Chris Radogno.
Well, thank you, and it is true I'm a little bit of an obsessive grandmother. So, but Sloan and Reese, I have to say, are number 2 and 3. I have a 2-year-old named Knox and another one due on the 4th of July. So it's raining babies in my world, which is why we do what we do. Also, I want to especially thank all of my colleagues who are here from both sides of the aisle. It's really nice to see my Democratic colleagues as well as my Republican colleagues. And I have to mention they missed one of them. Sue Resin is here as well. So thank you for being here. You know, we're going to talk a little bit today about how I see things in the state, and it'll be clear that there are partisan differences, but I think it's particularly important when we're talking about partisan differences that we have both parties in the room so we know, how we are viewing the world. So again, thank you for everyone that is here today. I know in recent weeks you've heard from a number of different speakers, and I've been at several of these meetings, and recently you heard from Senate President Cullerton. I was here for his speech, and he listed a fairly long list of accomplishments during his tenure as the Senate President. And frankly, many of them I would not disagree with. He has certainly done some very important things while he's had the honor of serving as the Senate President. But what I find is that he, and in my view, many other Democrats, oftentimes paint a rather rosy picture of what is going on here in our state. Now, that's not to say there's not some good things going on. Just a week or so ago, we had the digital hub that was announced with great fanfare. We learned that ADM is keeping their international headquarters here in Illinois, even without a tax incentive. We've had a few jobs created here and there, and we certainly have an abundance of natural resources in terms of our transportation hub, great education institutions, and a very educated workforce. But all is not well in Illinois. What I want you to do for a moment is close your eyes and engage in this little exercise with me. Close your eyes and picture a really pretty flower in a window. Really spectacular in every way. But now, pull back from that flower. And what you see is that flower is sitting in a window in a very dilapidated house, and one that is in desperate need of repair. I think it's safe to say the Illinois Democrats would like you to focus on the flower. I'm here to remind you that we need to look at the whole picture, not just that pretty flower in the window. We've got to work together to fix that dilapidated house. So I want you to think back over the last 11 years when we have had one-party control in this state and what that record is. Illinois has the 3rd highest unemployment rate in the U.S. Illinois has the worst credit rating in the U.S. Illinois is spending more than the taxpayers can afford year after year. Illinois has record high taxes with more on the horizon. And Chicago, which is our economic engine, hugely important to this state, is cash-strapped and struggling with debt. Now, question is, can the good outweigh the bad? Well, maybe. If you recall, just last week the bond houses told us that we do have the wherewithal in this state to fix our problems. But the caveat is it can only be done with dramatic changes and good policy decisions. So let's focus on that whole picture and not just the pretty flower in the window. Illinois has tax instability and uncertainty, and that is costing us jobs and people. Let's talk about taxes for a moment. The Democrats, as you recall, partnered with Governor Quinn and passed a 67% income tax increase. As Senator Cullerton says, that's the Republican description. It's 2% if you're a Democrat. That happened, as you know, in the middle of the night, a lame duck session in 2011. Now, recall, 2011 was after the huge recession that we had. So the rest of the country was coming out of this, and the Democrats are raising taxes. They said it would be temporary, and frankly, by law, it will sunset in January to 3.75% for individuals. The Democrats promised that that would fix that dilapidated house, and it hasn't. So with spending and policy decisions that we've made, the house is still a wreck, with a $3 billion budget hole and $6.3 billion in unpaid bills, and it appears very unlikely that they will honor their promise to have that tax go away. Now, on top of that, what we hear are the Democrats pushing for a progressive tax, which in reality means a net tax increase. They'll say, don't worry, only the rich will pay more. But with tax rates as high as 9%, and I take that from the only published schedule that we've seen, their plan under that schedule would raise taxes on any income over $18,000. So to the issue of uncertainty, 2 years ago, you had someone paying 3% in taxes. Now they're paying 5%. They may be paying 3.75% or as high as 9%. Now, that means that for job creators who probably are in that higher tax bracket, small business owners who pay their taxes through the individual rate, they have no idea if they're going to be paying 3.75 or 9. That's a big swing, and that impacts decision making. It impacts decisions as to whether you're going to start a business, if you do, where you're going to locate it, and it also affects expansion decisions in all the same ways. When you see the Democrats' proposal on the ballot, and remember, it will require a constitutional amendment. So the first hurdle is to get that through the legislature onto the ballot. Republicans uniformly oppose it. I believe every Republican has signed onto a resolution in opposition. But that proposal for the progressive rate will not specify a tax rate. It will only allow the legislature to implement a graduated tax. The Democrats will ask you to trust them and reassure you that it will not be coming out of your pocket. But remember, they have taken $26 billion from you in the middle of the night, and that house still needs fixing. So I think trusting them in that regard is a very steep climb. So in addition, though, to just the tax uncertainty and instability, we also have a pretty inhospitable business climate. It's the kind of environment that continues to destroy our jobs climate. Again, job creators don't have a lot of predictability or stability. Illinois is already an outlier in workers' comp and other business costs. And now we hear from the Democrats and the governor a litany of changes that they're talking about that would raise costs and increase red tape for business. We have proposals on paid sick leave for all, new workplace bullying policies, Family and Medical Leave Act for Illinois businesses for grandparents, and I'm pretty sympathetic to that, and disclosure of proprietary information. So take any one of those and it may make some sense, but when you put all of those together and you're already thinking, yikes, I might be paying as much as 9%, now I could have all this red tape, and additional costs in complying with all of these programs, again, you come back to where do I really want to locate. These are important signals, and they're scary ones when the majority party with complete control has the ability to make that happen, and it makes Illinois less attractive. These are troubling times for Illinois, and nothing, I think, says that louder than our out-migration statistics. These are alarming and insidious statistics. Atlas and Allied moving van lines have said that Illinois' out-migration was the second highest in the nation in 2013. Chicago's out-migration is the sixth worst among the 200 major metropolitan areas. A recent University of Illinois study confirms that outmigration, and it tells us that fewer people are moving into Illinois than are moving out. And that's people of every age. I think of particular concern, it is the loss of young adults early in their careers who are taking their children and moving. So we're losing children under the age of 10 and their parents. So not only are families leaving, but these younger and middle-aged families have our potential entrepreneurs at their helm. People who take the risks to invest their time and energy and money in order to create jobs. I think the loss of these entrepreneurs is a devastating loss in the long term for this state. It's a very scary trend. The other group we hear a lot about are the newly retired or those thinking about being retired, talking about leaving this state and taking their money with them, or getting to that 6 months plus 1 day to have a tax home in another state. You hear it all the time at gatherings. I was somewhere not too long ago with a financial planner who said 4 out of 10 of his wealthier clients are all trying to figure out a way to get a tax home outside of Illinois. That's a scary thought. Think tank analyses tells us that the majority are leaving for jobs. The majority of working age people, obviously, are leaving for jobs. It's either their job was eliminated, or there's a better job in another state, or there's a better opportunity for success if you're a job creator. Now, we cannot blame the weather, although that may totally change economic trends after this winter, other than, of course, for the retirees. But the U.S. Census Bureau tells us that the #1 state that people are moving from, or moving to from Illinois, is Indiana. And I don't think they have any better sunshine than we have. The U of I, and remember that is our premier academic institution, says, and this is a quote out of their demographic report, quote, "The state's best tool to prevent outmigration is to focus on job growth." So as Illinois looks to solve its problems, we have to get down to what they really are. It's not just this year's budget, although that gets a lot of attention, and it will be a doozy, no question about it. But it's the underlying issues that influence people's behavior, and it's those underlying issues that put us in that downward spiral of losing taxpayers. So as a leader of the Senate Republicans, I want to emphatically reassure you that we have made our priorities clear, and they are different than the Democratic priorities. #1, in order to fix the state budget permanently, we're going to have to fix the state economy, and that means to roll back the job-killing income tax increase. Take that progressive tax off the table, as it instills too much uncertainty. We have to enact good policy, such as causation in workers' comp, or even a form of apportionment, if not full causation. We have to work in a bipartisan fashion to develop long-range, sustainable economic development programs. And when I say bipartisan, I mean not only taking Democrat ideas and putting Republican votes on it, but vice versa. So in addition to fixing the economy, we also have to restore fiscal discipline. We have to bring the state's spending in line with the revenues. No more propping up spending at a level that is unreal, unaffordable, and unsustainable. We have to target and eliminate wasteful pet programs, and I will say more about that in just a moment. And thirdly, we have to seize the opportunity for savings with best practices in all of our service delivery systems, with efficiencies, not just slashing costs. We can do things better and smarter. With these three, unless we do these three things, Illinois will absolutely continue to see tax increases. Taxpayers can't afford it, and there's fewer of them to pay. They will leave. Without those three things, Illinois taxpayers will continue to be abused, and the House is going to stay in ruins, no matter what kind of a budget gets patched together this year. There hasn't been a lot of fiscal discipline in Illinois in the last 11 years of one-party control, and possibly not before. I don't want to be overly partisan, but certainly this model we're in now is not working. We've seen some shameful waste and spending, and I want to offer 3 examples. Medicaid, which is an $11 billion program. It's the most expensive program in state government. It's double the cost of the pension programs. Well, for 10 years, Republicans pushed for independent verification procedures and other changes. We wanted to be sure that only those that were legitimately eligible received taxpayer services and only the amount of services that they really needed. We actually had a major breakthrough last year with a bipartisan reform, votes going two ways. But within months, the pieces were beginning to be rolled back, and that's costing taxpayers. We're still fighting the fight to be sure that the eligibility check is doing all that it needs to do, and it is saving money. And Heather should deserve some special thanks for working hard on that issue. It's a tough one. There are still programs out there, though, that are costing us millions of dollars. And millions may not solve the problem, but when you add it up, it's real money. Take one example, this one I just love, the Grow Your Own Teacher program. It's a laudable goal, it feels good, but it costs taxpayers $266,000 to train every teacher that goes through that program. That just isn't a good use of resources. It's hard to believe that we can't eliminate that program. But again, I think with one-party control, it's much more difficult to get rid of those types of programs. But it gets worse than that. I'm sure last week, that you all read last week, the Auditor General released the audit of Governor Quinn's Neighborhood Recovery Initiative. It's the first $55 million in about a $100 million program. It is little more than a political slush fund. So the program was created just before an election to target violence, but curiously, the most violent neighborhoods were excluded. There was no monitoring, no management, no accountability, no documentation. In other words, there was no fiscal integrity. So here we have schools desperate for funding, prisons are closing, potholes are being unfilled, but $55 million was earmarked for Governor Quinn's pet project. I don't know if he's broken the law, but at the very least, he certainly violated the trust of the taxpayers. The Auditor General only looked at the spending up until 2012. The Neighborhood Recovery Initiative program, or its successor, is in the current budget. We're not sure if it's in the next budget because the budget address has been pushed back until after the primary. So schools and state agencies and taxpayers won't know until March 26th what Governor Quinn's budget priorities are for the coming year. Now critics, and some of them are in this room, believe that that's a political move so he can know who his opponent is in November. Governor Quinn says it's so that he can present a 5-year plan. But I say let's look at his 5-year record. With Governor Quinn at the helm, again, the Democrats in the House and Senate for 11 years, Illinois is the 3rd highest unemployment, the worst credit rating, spending more than we can afford, and we have record high taxes. One-party control has diminished and lowered Illinois' place in our national economy and squandered the phenomenal position that we're in. Those abundant natural resources, prime geography, transportation, outstanding public and private education institutions, and a skilled workforce. And Chicago has fared just as poorly under one-party control for an even longer time. The state's economic engine is in fiscal crisis, and it's on the verge of meltdown. It is similarly facing a downward spiral of higher taxes and people leaving to find more value for their tax dollars. That's what people want. I think they're willing to pay. They don't feel like they're getting value. But 2014 does offer us an opportunity in Illinois. We have a gubernatorial race. We can restore partisan balance, which I believe is critical, by electing a new governor. Importantly, we have to embrace a fair legislative districting process. I believe that will also be on the ballot. It will be put on not by the General Assembly as the progressive tax may be, but rather through a ballot initiative. Very important that we have competitive legislative districts in order to have good policy. If we bring balance to the General Assembly and end the one-party rule that has stifled Illinois jobs, climate, and cost taxpayers more, we won't be forcing our taxpayers to run anymore to the borders of Indiana, Missouri, Texas, and Florida. And hopefully we can all look at that very pretty flower in a very sound and stable and well-repaired house. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks so much. Now, the next part of the program relies on all of you. On your tables are question forms, and you get, pencils and pens. Send your questions down, and we'll get them to Chris Radogno. Chris, our first is from City Club Governor Ed Mazer. Should there be legislation that mandates that a governor's budget message be delivered prior to a primary election?
Well, frankly, that is the law currently. It should have been delivered in February. So I do think it's a good idea. I think that the business of offering the budget, because it's a critical part of the governor's job, should go on outside of the re-election campaigns.
Here we go.
Okay.
All right, from Mark Weiermiller, member of the City Club, on pensions. Would you, on new employees of the state of Illinois, support either IRAs or 401ks or Social Security for the new employees so that the state could start phasing out of its pension mess?
Well, first, I do think we made a substantial step towards phasing out of the mess with the pension reform we passed and with passing the second tier in the pension reform program. To the issue of eliminating defined contributions, I believe everybody should have some defined contribution. Most workers have Social Security. Many, many state workers and teachers do not have Social Security. So I would not be in favor of leaving them with no defined benefit whatsoever. Obviously, we need to tinker with the elements. If we went into Social Security, there's another set of problems, not the least of which is whether the federal government wants a bunch more people on Social Security. But it would cause some issues with respect to funding both Social Security and an IRA. But bottom line, I think everyone needs some defined benefit.
Okay, thank you. Edward Cooper, a member of the City Club, asks, if and when the income tax increase actually expires, where do you propose to find the revenue to make up that gap?
Well, I just gave you a couple of examples. I believe that there is still room for some across-the-board cuts in state government. I mean, when you hear about Treasurer Rutherford talk about having accomplished that in his office, that's a real-life example of that being able to happen. There's two ways to go in reducing a tax. You can either do it thoughtfully and change programs over time, which is what we thought was going to happen. And if that doesn't happen, it's a much more blunt reset. And yes, it's going to cause some pain, and we're going to have to ask the religious community and communities to pick up some of that slack. But if we do not reset in this state and bring our spending in line with revenues and stop raising taxes every couple of years, we simply won't have people left. Jobs are leaving now. We're at a crossroads. We have to cut the spending. Do we do it thoughtfully? We've kind of missed that opportunity. Or do we have to do it a little more blunt edge? But there's a lot of issues in politics where people say, oh my God, the world will end if XYZ passes. And we've seen over and over and over again, when XYZ passes, the resilient people in this state make it work. And I have confidence that we can get by on the revenue that's coming into this state, which is north of $135 billion.
Okay, on on one area of spending, Jeff Collard, a member of the City Club and who's with the Haymarket Center. Full disclosure, I'm a director, but I didn't. Jeff, did I set this up with you? No. Right. It's a very serious question. This came up when we had Dan Cronin here. Heroin use and abuse is exploding in Chicago and surrounding counties. Yet, Illinois has cut funding for treatment by $57 million since 2009. How will the state of Illinois work to rebuild the treatment system?
Well, ideally, we go to prevention before we need to get to treatment. And that is one thing that there are task forces in both the House and the Senate addressing this problem of the heroin addiction all over the state. it is truly a problem. I know I'm looking forward to the results of both of those task forces so that we can implement policies that will prevent the need for continuing to treat issues on the back end.
From John Gates, should we broaden the sales tax to match our adjacent states, that is, to include some services and then lower other sales tax rates?
I think we need to be open to discussion about modernizing the tax structure. The difficulty we have in doing that right now, again, with one-party control, is I don't think there's an honest back and forth discussion. So I think we'd be foolish to say we have to just keep doing what we've been doing for 100 years. But we also need an environment, a political environment, where we can have an honest discussion about the implications of those changes for everybody in the state. And I don't think we have that right now.
Generated some good questions. Two more. From John P. O'Neill, a member of the City Club. How do we maintain our transportation advantage in Illinois, given the fiscal troubles in which we find ourselves?
Well, that's a very good question, because that's one of those great resources we have. We have a lot of transportation infrastructure here, rail and roads, but because of our budgetary problems, we're not really keeping those in very good repair. Those are the very kinds of things that I think, set us apart from Detroit. We have so many good things like that, but it's up to us to maintain it. And that speaks again to the necessity, the absolute necessity, to get our fiscal house in order and cut our spending so that we can properly address our priorities.
And finally, a question on politics. Imagine that. From Brian Richter Brim, whose affiliation ICHRO, which I don't know what that is. Oh, terrific. Illinois House Republican Organization. I didn't know.
It's IL.
I don't know. Oh, that's IL.
Oh,
He is a member of the City Club, though. Anyway, what will it take to rebuild the Republican Party in Illinois? Now, we only have until April, okay? Okay?
Well, again, I think, if we can get some partisan balance back into the state, obviously that presents opportunities for infrastructure growth, and people have a positive thing to rally around. We've been in the dumps for a long time. The Republican Party has suffered from a downward spiral for a while, just like the state. So I think that if we make some changes, people can get excited about good policy discussions and making some changes. So I hope that happens.
Terrific. All right. Well, there you go.
The Illinois Channel's coverage of the state legislature is underwritten by the Illinois Trial Lawyers Association.
The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members, leaders in business, education, law, medicine, and other fields from across Illinois.
Hi, I'm Delitso Solomoyo, President of the Illinois Association of Community Action Agencies. We are an organization of 36 member agencies located around Illinois which provide needed services to our fellow citizens. It may be helping provide services at a homeless shelter, or helping to provide affordable utilities to low-income people across Illinois through such programs as the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, better known as LIHEAP, or working with rural communities and helping them maintain needed community infrastructure. These are just a few of the many services provided by Illinois' community action agencies. But to provide these services efficiently and effectively, we need solid information. That's why, in addition to heading the Illinois Association of Community Action Agencies, I am also proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. I have watched the Illinois Channel for years. It provides serious coverage of the Illinois legislature, public policy discussions, and one-on-one interviews with leaders from across Illinois. It's the kind of solid, in-depth information all of us need to get beyond partisan politics and political spin and just hear directly what's happening, what's being proposed, and why. I know and you know that Illinois is filled with good people. But if we are to have good, effective public policies, we need to base those on good information. We get that from the Illinois Channel. That's why I watch it, and I hope you will too. The Illinois Channel, It works for all of us.
Next from Springfield, we go one-on-one with Dan Long, director of the Government Forecasting and Accountability Agency that collects and publishes economic data that's used by the state legislature to help them form the state budget. This runs about 30 minutes.
Dan Long, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
It's great to be back.
Before we start, we who are around the Capitol use these phrases like COGFA, which is your agency, but for those who aren't around the Capitol, what does that stand for? And just give us a brief synopsis of what it is you do.
It's the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability. We're a legislative support agency, so we're part of the legislative branch of government. And we are charged with providing the legislature with information on the Illinois economy, doing revenue estimates each year before they start the budget process. We also have some oversight of the pension systems and put out reports each year on the financial condition of the pension systems, oversight of the State Employees Group Insurance Program, and have to put out reports on that each year, and also have hearings when they get ready to do prior to the open enrollment. And then, every year we put out a report on the Illinois economy as well, which we just issued just last week. All of our reports are on our website and available to the public.
So in essence, the state will come out and put out their budget. The legislature will put together a budget, and they will say, typically, we estimate that we're going to have this much money coming in, we're going to be spending X number of billions of dollars, and here's how we're going to be spending it. And your agency is the one that is nonpartisan, so it gives the lawmakers and the governor some solid numbers upon which to base a budget.
It's different than a household budget. I mean, you can't start spending money until you know how much money you have available. And the Revenue Committee, the House Revenue Committee held hearings, as did the Senate Appropriation Committees. And they had us present our estimates of the revenues for fiscal year 15, which was a difficult year, as well as the governor's office of management and budget. And then last year they adopted a House resolution, which included a revenue estimate of right around $35.5 billion. And then this year the House recently adopted a revenue estimate of $34.5 billion, which was actually the numbers that we presented to the committee on what we believe will be the revenue available in fiscal year 2015.
Now, for the viewers, I just want to make this real simple. The fiscal year for the state of Illinois starts on July 1 and goes through June 30th. And when we refer to the fiscal year, it's always the year in which the budget ends. So right now, we're operating in fiscal year 14 because it'll be June 14 when this fiscal year ends. The budget that will be put together this spring is fiscal year 2015.
That is correct.
So when we get into these numbers, we're talking about the fiscal year of 2015 that starts July 1 and will run through June 30th of 2015.
That is correct.
Now, the interesting thing that why 2015 is a different year a little bit than what some of the previous years have been is because in January of 2011, the legislature increased, as everyone I think would know, the income tax rate. But it is going to go down in January of 2015, so halfway through the fiscal year of 2015. What impact is that going to have? Now, you just gave us, just to remind people of the numbers, the revenue that is being projected for 2015 is $1 billion, or at least that they're going to be using, right, as a budget, is $1 billion less than the previous year's budget.
That's correct.
So what impact is this going to have as far as having the tax go off, the tax increase, I should say, go off halfway through the fiscal year?
Well, obviously it's going to be a decline in revenues. The way the law was passed, it automatically, the rates automatically declined from 5% personal rate down to a 3.75%, and from a corporate from 7% to 5.25%. So we're projecting that could actually, over time, we'd lose about $1.8 billion to $9 billion in revenue in that first year. And then
I'm surprised it's even that low. I thought you would have lost even more than that.
well, it's only 6 months. And the other thing is that when they started the tax, you didn't get the revenues in right away. And so when it goes off, it takes some time for companies to adjust the tax rates, and so you may not lose as much revenue that first year. However, in the full year of 2016, we're anticipating the revenue decrease could be more like $4.5 billion, 4.5 to even $5 billion. But so it could be a significant decrease when we get to fiscal 16, because that'll be the first full year of implementation. The tax rates would have already been adjusted, and we expect to lose significantly more revenue.
Which is why, again, for the viewers, and to keep this in mind, A, in general, and B, relative to the election and what the gubernatorial candidates are saying, as well as those running for the legislature. Already, we have a backlog of bills that we haven't paid, and that backlog, as I understand it, is increasing.
I think it's probably gone down a bit, and it's gone down a bit for a couple of reasons. The legislature adopted a revenue estimate, as I indicated last year, of $35.5 billion. But we anticipate this year, as a result of some better performance from the sales tax and corporate income tax, that we may take in $36 billion. So about $600 million more or so than was projected. The plan has always been, if you take in more revenue, that would go to pay down unpaid bills. And so they have been paying some of those down. So where we may have carried over 8 or 9 billion, this year it may be closer to 6 billion, 6 to 7 billion. So we're clearly not out of the woods by any means. We're still carrying over unpaid bills, but I think that it's going to be less in the next fiscal year, and the payment cycles won't be quite as long as have been experienced.
Well, then that's good news. But again, if we lose $4.5 billion, this might be a stupid question, but what impact will that have on our ability to pay those bills?
Well, I think it'll be much more difficult to continue to pay them down, without a doubt. I mean, you've been able to because of the increased revenues that we've received, but we haven't, like you indicated, we're not out of the woods. We haven't paid down that total backlog. So it makes it more difficult to pay those bills down, because at the same time, you're going to have to make cuts in programmatic activities. I mean, you've got to, most of the money goes to education and social services, and so if you have less revenue, even next year, with $1 billion decrease, there's always spending pressures. There'll be more spending needed for things like Medicaid, the Medicaid program, and for costs of salaries and benefits of state employees. And education needs more money. So you've got those spending pressures at a time when you're going to have at least $1 billion less in revenue. So there'll have to be cuts in programs unless there's something else that's done prior to the tax coming off in January.
Yeah, no one wants to go out and say we're going to cut education, but or that we're going to cut services for the needy. But as we were talking, 44% state spending goes to education, and so that's both elementary, secondary, and higher education.
That's correct.
But also, that's not all money going into the classrooms. I mean, people might interpret it that way. Education spending also includes the pensions, what the teachers' pensions, is it?
Right, it includes the contributions the state makes to the teacher's pension and the state university retirement system as well.
So to some extent, it is 44% of the budget, but it's a little bit misleading in that it doesn't all go into the classroom.
Correct. But I think it's all considered education expenses, so they include those contributions as part of the education budget. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's part of the teacher salaries and benefits or university employees' benefits, so that it's not all for classrooms. That's correct.
And then human services make up about 39%. When we say human services, what are some of the programs that would be under that umbrella?
Well, the major program is the Medicaid program.
Healthcare for the indigent.
Correct. And that's actually growing now, as you know, with the expansion under the Affordable Care Act. You've got individuals coming on that are eligible under the new guidelines, but you've also got individuals who have been eligible all along. And I think that the administration's assuming that about 2/3 will be under the 100% being reimbursed by the federal government, but about 1/3 of those are going to be what they call woodwork, people that have always been eligible, and then the state only gets reimbursed 50% of those costs. So the Medicaid cost will be going up. And then you also have the Department of Human Services, and they operate all of the mental health centers and those types of programs that also require a lot of state expenditures.
When we have the legislature in and different ideas are proposed, some ideas come out of the legislature, some the governor would come up with. So the governor, so as we talked initially, you would give the lawmakers some, I wanted to say hard numbers, that might be a wrong, but that you give them in as much as you can a pretty good idea of what the revenues would be to work with.
Yes, and we believe that our estimate's a conservative estimate. I think the worst thing you can do is give an estimate that's overly optimistic, and then they appropriate those dollars to be spent, and you don't get them in, and you have to try to cut during the year. So we've indicated that we believe this is a conservative estimate, and if there's adjustments that need to be made after we get in final payments, say in April, and we see that the income tax is coming in better than we thought, well, maybe there'd be some more money available. But at this point, we think this is a conservative revenue estimate. It's the estimate that the legislature has adopted, and it's a little bit less than the governor's office of management and budget estimate.
But the thing I was going to say is when the governor proposes something like as now as part of the Affordable Care Act, other people will use the phrase Obamacare just so people know what we're talking about. The governor wants to expand Medicaid spending, as we just talked. And in other words, the point is when someone has a proposal, and whether it's the governor or the legislature, do you, what we would say in Congress, score that? Do you give them a cost estimate of what that program would be and what potential impact that would have on the state budget?
We did not score that particular program. The Department of Healthcare and Family Services that has all the numbers and works with the federal government, they provided the estimates on that. And of course, the federal government covers 100% of those newly eligible individuals that are becoming on to the Medicaid program. But then after, I think it's 2 or 3 years, that phases out. The state will have to pick up 10% of those costs, and that's a cost.
Right, so the feds will pick up 90%.
90%, but of those that are coming on that were eligible all along and just didn't realize it until they maybe got on this system to register, the state will only get 50% of those costs, and so that'll cause the Medicaid program costs to go up.
So if we look out 2 or 3 fiscal years ahead, years like say 2018 to 2020, in that period of time roughly, the Medicaid costs, unless something were to change in the program, might be expected to have a fairly large increase.
Yes, it'll continue to be a significant spending pressure on state government, absolutely. It'll continue to demand more of the resources available.
And just as does your agency, does COGFA run numbers that far out, or do you just work year to year? Do you say, almost like the ghost of Christmas future, if you enact this is what's going to happen in these out years?
Well, we're required to do a 3-year budget plan. So I mean, 3 year in terms of revenue projections. So we definitely project out the revenues, and you can somewhat project out expenditures as well. And you'll see that, particularly with the drop off in the taxes, in the corporate and personal income tax, that you start to see a larger and larger gap between your revenues and your expenditures, which means that there'll have to be some reduction in spending, or some other revenue source to make up that difference, or a combination.
How do we have, in your estimation, currently a balanced budget?
Well, I think the balance is whatever the legislature considers a balanced budget. I think that when you have a budget that continues to carry over $4 or $5 billion unpaid bills, it's hard to say it's balanced. I mean, if you were just not making payments in your household budget, and you're just extending your credit cards over a longer period of time and paying interest on it, it's difficult to say that's balanced.
Yeah, yeah. So practically speaking, it's not balanced. Sometimes we use different phraseologies, especially in government. So the point would be, then as we look forward into these out years, 3 or 4 fiscal years ahead, do you recall, I mean, how out of balance would we be? Are you projecting, I don't want to please stump the band here, but I'm just wondering, I guess what I'm trying to think in terms of for the voters and both, as we assess in this election cycle and what's being proposed by various people running for, say, governor, what would be the consequence to us as a state and as to individuals relative to our ability to keep functioning or putting money into education and all that services the government provides if we have this expansion of Medicaid, and what impact would that have fiscally on us?
It's not just Medicaid. You're going to continue to have demands in the education community. I mean, education, elementary and secondary, the State Board of Education is asking for $1 billion more in spending in fiscal 2015 at a time we're going to have $1 billion less in revenue. And we know that the Medicaid expenditures are going up, and we know that the costs of general state government are going up as well. So I don't have exact numbers in terms of the out years, but you can assume that these expenditures increase at least at the rate of inflation, if not higher. And if you're having your tax revenues continuing to decrease significantly, I mean, you know, $4.5 to $5 billion, the gap grows very large very quickly.
Yeah, so I mean
you could be in a range of $8–10 billion in 2016.
Just to put it simply then, if we allow the tax increase, I'm not arguing in favor or oppose, I'm just laying out the facts here as much as we can. If we allow the tax increase of January 11, which is now supposed to go off in January 15, if we allow that to go away, in the following fiscal year we'll be down by around $4 billion in revenue, and at the same time that will be kicking up because of federal spending, we'll be incurring higher costs in a variety of fields. So we also don't know what the impact of the pension will be because that still has to be decided by the Supreme Court.
That is correct.
How do you, as an agency where you're trying to give, again, lawmakers and the governor good numbers, I guess the governor has somewhat his own number of crunchers, but when you're trying to give people in state government good numbers, how do you handle a situation like the pensions, where the pension was increasing the costs by $1 billion a year, but now you don't know what the Supreme Court's going to be? Do you give them 2 different scenarios if it's enacted or if they throw it out?
Well, what happened this year is they didn't assume any savings. I think the savings is projected to be 1.5 to 1.6 billion once it's enacted. There were none of those savings included in the fiscal 15 budget because everyone knew it was going to go to court, and it could take 2 years to have this work out. You may not have it decided in by fiscal 2016. So I think the prudent thing to do, and the legislature is very prudent in this, is not count those savings until you have some definitive ruling from the courts. And you can't. You really just can't do that because nothing changes. Now, the pension increase, as you indicated, and it is true, last year went up about $900 million, and fiscal 13 went up $1 billion. It's leveled off. This year, I think the increase to the pension systems is less than $200 million, the incremental increase.
Now, why is that, Dwayne?
Well, in part, it was a result of investment returns. 2 years ago, the stock market was down, and the systems got in significantly less. In fact, I think it was close to zero when they're assuming around 8.5%. They've lowered those now to 7.5% for 2 of the systems, and teachers 7.75. This year, they had double-digit returns, close to 18–19%. So you only get revenue from 3 sources in pensions: the employee contributions, the state contribution, and investment returns. So when investment returns are down, then because of the state law and the formula that's used, the state has to put in more money. This year, everything's working well. Investment returns are very good. So the contribution by the state is just a normal contribution. So,
which is an important point too. That I think people who don't personally invest don't understand why we have a stock market, and they don't see the connection between the market performance and how it actually does impact them in a significant way, whether they invest personally or not. And this is one because of all these pensions funds, whether state and private, or that's where their money is invested.
Absolutely.
Matters
In
dramatically.
equities, yeah, they're very well diversified in equities and real estate, some in venture capital. And when the market does well, as it has, so they've done well. We adopted something called smoothing a few years ago, so that when they have losses, it's smoothed out over 5 years. And the same thing, that when you get significant investment gains like they did this year, it's smoothed out over 5 years. Well, offset some of these big
Swings in the stock
correct.
market valuations.
Correct. That's right.
So we have the money going down. We've talked about that the tax increase. That could be, there may or may not be a move to extend that so that we don't lose the $4 billion. Again, do you run different scenarios on something like that? Do you say if the tax is kept or if the tax isn't kept, and how it goes? And
Sure.
to whom do you share that information, and how do you share it?
Well, we certainly share it with the legislature. Usually make, our commission meets, and we provide that information to our commission. We're a bipartisan commission. I should have said that in the beginning.
So you're almost like a committee. You have different members of the House and Senate on your oversight board, right?
We have 6 members of the House, 6 members of the Senate, 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans. We're currently co-chaired by Senator Michael Frerichs of Champaign and Representative Jill Tracy of Quincy, who both happen to be running for statewide office.
Right.
But we meet, at least once a quarter, if not more, commission to present this information. And then we're often asked to come to present the information to the House Revenue Committee, the Senate Appropriation and Revenue Committees as well, so that everybody knows kind of what's going on. I think it's just critical that you have an idea of what's going on in your revenue base before you can really start doing anything with the budget. And the House has done this now for the last several years, adopted a resolution, adopted a revenue number. They take that number and then they divide it amongst the 4 appropriations committees. There's an appropriation committee for public safety, for education, and human services, and general government, general services. So they then allocate those funds, and those appropriation committees have to work within those numbers. And this year they're going to have to make reductions, and they've had to do that in the past. And it's very difficult when you have to start making cuts in state government.
The average citizen doesn't think that we've cut anything, just that we keep spending more and more and more. That might be true as a top line. I mean, often it's true as a top line number, but where has if in any areas, has the state cut back on its expenditures?
Well, I think they've obviously cut back in the education area, even though that the foundation level may be $6,000 per student. Because of the lack of funds, they're only giving them 80 or 85% of that allocation. So you've seen cutbacks there. I think you've seen attempts to certainly reduce or control some of the increases in the human services area with the SMART program that was passed to go through the Medicaid eligibility rolls and try to remove those who are no longer eligible. That process continuing. Of course, now we're getting more people into that program as a result of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, as you mentioned. The governor's closed some facilities. We've reduced state government in terms of the number of employees. I think that really we've got one of the lowest state workforces in terms of population of any state right now. So there's been attempts to control spending over the last several years. And like I said, the other thing is they've adopted some conservative revenue estimates, and if more money came in, you're able to use that to pay down the backlog of unpaid bills.
How long have you been running CACA?
14 years.
As you look back, how would you assess where we are fiscally now as compared to over that 14-year period?
A very difficult situation. We're probably in a more difficult fiscal situation than I've seen in my years here.
And are you encouraged or not encouraged as you look forward into the next 5 years?
Oh, I think I'm encouraged.
And I know we should say you're not a partisan. You're strictly just
Right.
a numbers cruncher, and you try to provide a service. So nothing you're saying, I don't want to be interpreted
No,
by
no,
the
no,
viewers
no, no.
that you've taken any position on policy, but just
And to correct the fiscal imbalance, you can only do things. You got to reduce expenditures, or you have to get revenues. And I think what normally happens in these cases is some kind of a combination. Some kind of a combination. I would think that maybe they're going to keep part of this income tax, not let it go down to the levels that it's slated to go down. And this is just me talking. And at the same time, you're going to have to try to control the expenditures on the other side. As you know, there's been a bill introduced too for a progressive income tax, but that's prohibited right now by the state constitution, and that takes a 3/5 vote in the House and Senate, and then has to go to the voters. So that's a lengthy process, and I don't know if that would occur. And then that's not something that's an immediate solution to begin with.
you say, first of all, for the voters would have to approve that so
Yeah,
that, like at the federal level, those who make more money would pay a higher percentage of their income.
Perhaps we haven't seen how it would actually be implemented, but I would think that could be the safe assumption. Right now, it's just a flat tax, and if you go to some progressive tax, I think as you make more money, you probably pay a little higher tax.
We use this term, and we'll close out here quickly here, but we use this term scoring, but basically that's just a way of saying when someone proposes a bill, they might, and it's a spending bill or a fiscal bill, they would say, if this were enacted, what would the cost be to the state, or what revenues would it have to the state? How often is scoring a part of your workload?
Oh, we do it on a regular basis because every bill that's introduced that impacts revenues, we do an estimate of whether it'll increase or decrease revenues. Any bill that would impact pensions, we do a analysis on what that impact is going to be in terms of either increasing the pension costs or decreasing the pension costs. And we do it to a certain extent on some programmatic activities, but not all the programmatic activities because we simply don't have the resources to do that. But if we're asked to do it on something major, then we do that. But we do a significant amount of analysis of legislation that impacts revenue, impacts certain areas of spending in state government.
Now, anytime you do something like that, and it's just like there's presumptions, you're presuming any number of things. You're taking your best educated guess looking into the future. Do you ever look back and on those, you're not going to go back on the bills that didn't become law, I guess, but on those that do become law, do you go back and kind of see how you're scoring compared to the reality, and does that help you make better informed decisions and analysis?
Absolutely. And we do it on a regular basis on revenue estimates. Like I said, we increased our revenue estimates in November after the fiscal year had started. We plan to increase it again this year by about $250 million. So, on a $35 billion base, a $600 million increase is not a huge percentage-wise. I mean, that's a pretty good estimate. But there's things that occur in the economy that can impact how your revenues come in each year.
Yeah, and of course you can't control the national economy, and if it goes down, then that's going to impact us.
Right. And Illinois' economy's not done as well as the nation. Our unemployment rate's continually been higher than the national level and higher than the Midwest. So we lost a significant number of jobs during the Great Recession, and we haven't really recouped those as some other states have. So those are all things that we monitor and look at.
One last thing aside that might impact the revenue, and it's kind of been discussed for a number of years, is the expansion of gambling or gaming, depending upon what phraseology we want to use. Have you run any numbers on that? And if that were to pass, what kind of dollars would, because I can just imagine somebody might say if we pass gaming, we can allow the income tax to go down. But what kind of revenues would it mean for the state if the gaming expansion were to go through?
Not as much as you would think, because what happens with gaming, we have a lot of gaming out there now. We have a number of boats out there. We're just implementing the video gaming, and there's like 14,000 terminals, and that's probably going to go up to like 22,000. And so what happens is that, just like when we have a new boat that opened in Des Plaines, that's generating a lot of revenue, but it's taking revenue away from the boat in Elgin. So there's some cannibalization that takes place. So I can't remember the exact number, but it wouldn't solve your problems at all. I mean, it would generate some revenue. And we're already seeing now, I mean, we peaked out in terms of getting like $700 million a year, I think, from riverboat gambling, and it's dropped down to close to $400 million over the last several years. Not only from competition as you put on new boats in Illinois, but Indiana's added new boats right across the border from Chicago, and you get a lot of gamers go over. As you know, down in the Metro East area, you've got a number of casinos that opened in St. Louis that have taken away from the boat that's in East St. Louis or in Alton. And so there's a lot of competition among gaming. It doesn't generate the kind of revenue that you did, even if we added 4 or 5 new boats. A casino in Chicago would probably bring back some of those that are maybe going over to Indiana, but no, it's not a solution to the, certainly wouldn't come anywhere near to generating the $4 billion, $5 billion you're going to lose in the income tax. I mean, you may only get a few $100 million a year from a big expansion like that.
Well, Dan Long, thanks for sharing your information with us, and we appreciate you joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
It's always great talking to you.
Thanks.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members, leaders in business, education, law, medicine, and other fields from across Illinois.
Hi, I'm Bob Schillerstrom, and I work now as an attorney with the firm of Ice Miller, helping people in business address issues they have with government. But for 12 years, I was honored to serve as chairman of the DuPage County Board. As the second largest county in Illinois, the issues we faced in DuPage were a reflection of the issues facing the state. How to manage government well so that we can deliver the best government for the least cost to the taxpayers. How to provide benefits to government workers without breaking the county's budget. And how to attract new business and keep the businesses we already had happy and growing. And I'm proud to say we lowered taxes for 9 out of the 12 years that I was in office. Local government is a key component of our democracy. It is the government that is closest to the people and which deals with the majority of the issues citizens confront on a regular basis. But whether at the county level, the municipal level, or the state level, as citizens, we need to have some ideas of the issues facing us. That's one reason I'm proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel's mission is to bring televised coverage of state government to citizens across the state, from Rockford to Carbondale. And since 2003, the Illinois Channel's done just that. Whether covering the remarks of Supreme Court Justice Kilbride on the crisis of court funding, or their coverage of the legislature's reforming state pensions, or their profile of judicial candidates running for the appellate court, the Illinois Channel keeps us connected to the issues and individuals engaged in running our government. I'm former DuPage County Board Chairman Bob Schillerstrom. I watch the Illinois Channel, and I hope you do too. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
Next from Springfield, 3 Republican gubernatorial candidates and other speakers address Illinois gun owners as they gather for their lobby day. This is the first gathering of Illinois gun owners since the passage of the concealed carry law in Illinois. This runs about 50 minutes.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to see everyone here again. You know, last year we stood here and we had just won a court case, and we said that we would get concealed carry. We said that it would be a statewide concealed carry, and that we said it would be a shall issue concealed carry, and we've gotten all of those things. Okay, so I'm glad for that. Now, there are many here that would look at us and say, you know, those people got concealed carry. Now maybe they'll just go away. Well, guess what? We're not going away. Okay? One of the phrases that we hear a lot these days is we won the war but lost the peace. In the gun rights battle, the fact is that there is no peace. The war just changes form. And so this war is going to go on forever and ever and ever, and we're going to be part of it, and we're going to keep being victorious. People who fail to realize that the war changes form are the ones who wind up losing the peace, and we will not do that. The war is now going to switch to ways to dismantle concealed carry. It's going to switch to ways to inhibit our firearms rights in various ways, like gun bans, ammo taxes, licensing. We're seeing all these things in the legislature this year. These are all test cases. They'll push them if they can, but this is what they have planned for us. They want to make Illinois into another Connecticut, and we're not going to let that happen. So we must always be on the move and on the push to be organized, to be joined together, and to make sure that our Second Amendment rights are safe and that the next generation's Second Amendment rights are safe. So this has been our struggle for a long time, and so we're going to do that. I have to fill in for Don Moran, who is trapped in Chicago, the president, but our struggle started back about 2005 when we changed tactics. As you know, we went from just trying to do things legislatively. We went into the court system, and our members said, go into the court system. We said, it's going to cost a ton of money. He said, go into the court system. It cost a ton of money. But anyway, we have now won 10 court cases in a row against the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago. We have more to go. Right now, I can't remember. I think we got 4 or 5 more cases working. So we're challenging the assault weapons bans. We're actually looking into the registration schemes in various cities around the state that have not abandoned theirs. We're going to go on, and we're going to pick them off one at a time, and we're going to make them wish they give up their registration scheme. We're going to make them wish they had. Simple as that. So the courts have been on our side, but we also know that we're only one election away from them not being on our side. And so the election cycle, which is every 2 years, and if you sit in my seat, it seems like it's every 2 days, has to go on. And we're going to be talking about that today. And I'm going to, our next speaker is Senator Dale Ryder, and I'll let Mike introduce him, but I want you to know that this is going to go on, and it's going to be expensive. And sometime today, you'll see those familiar red buckets coming around. That's what helps pay for court cases. And I get to see the bills, and I didn't know there were that many zeros in the world, but there are. Anyway, so anything you can do to help us, and thank you for being here. And I am privileged to be the executive director of the Illinois State Rifle Association. Thank you.
This next gentleman has been a state senator since 2003 after serving in the Illinois House of Representatives for the preceding 6 years. He serves as Republican spokesman for the Senate Criminal Law Committee and serves as member of the Senate Executive Assignments, Judiciary, Energy, and Appropriations Committees. He's always been a strong supporter of our Second Amendment rights. I'm very proud to introduce the Honorable Dale Ryder.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Springfield. Welcome to the center of state government. Welcome to the place that's most effective for you to lobby to protect and advocate for our collective Second Amendment rights. Thank you for being here. My name's Dale Ryder. I'm a state senator from East Central Illinois. I represent all or parts of 14 counties in East Central and Southeastern Illinois. And I have a 100% voting record with the National Rifle Association and the Illinois State Rifle Association. Now, no applause, because I get paid to do that. I get paid to uphold your constitutional rights. The first thank you goes to you, because you're not getting paid to do this. You're coming here because you care about the Constitution, you care about your Second Amendment rights, and you care about your children's and your grandchildren's. So thank you for doing that. I have one simple message for everyone in this room today, and it's this, is that the single most dangerous threat to our collective Second Amendment rights and the hard-fought win to adopt concealed carry in this state works on the second floor of the Illinois State Capitol, and his name is Pat Quinn. We are richly blessed to live in a state, in a country where every 2 years we are given the opportunity to fundamentally change the course of our government. And we have another opportunity coming up this November. If you care about the elderly lady who lives by herself, if you care about her ability to defend herself, then Pat Quinn has to go. If you care at all about the man, the husband and the father who lives with his family in a rural area where maybe it takes law enforcement officers 10, 15, 20 minutes to respond to a 911 call, if you care at all about his ability to defend himself and his wife and his children and his property, Pat Quinn has to go. And if you care at all about the single mother who lives in Chicago, the governor's hometown, who lives in a crime-ravaged area where she has no faith whatsoever what might be coming through the front door next, she has no faith whatsoever whether or not law enforcement could get there in time to protect her or protect her children, if you care at all about her ability to protect herself and protect her kids, Pat Quinn has to go. In November, there is one choice, and there is one election that matters more than any else, and that is our collective opportunity to make sure that the hard-fought wins that have occurred here in this state capitol in the last year are preserved. Do that for your children and your grandchildren and yourselves and our Constitution by making sure that Pat Quinn goes home on Election Day in November. Thank you all very much. Enjoy your day.
This next gentleman is the current Illinois State Treasurer. He was elected to the Illinois Senate and the Illinois House of Representatives, where he served as Assistant Republican Leader in both chambers. He was past head of international business for the Illinois Department of Commerce. I'm proud to introduce Illinois State Treasurer and gubernatorial candidate, the Honorable Dan Rutherford.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, how many of you been in this room before? All right. How many of you been in this room when I've been in the room with you before? There you go. I look back on this, Rich. I look back and I know 1992 was the first gathering, and this is the 8th year that you've done the rally for iGold. I am proud to tell you this is the 8th year in a row I've been with you here at the Prairie Capital Convention Center. I've been a state senator. I remember when I became your state treasurer, I was the only constitutional officer that came here to encourage you, to talk to you, and to thank you for what you're doing standing up for our constitutional rights. All right, where I've done this every year and I want to do it again. Where are those of you that are from Chicago and Cook County? Raise your hands. We want to thank you. You are so great. Thank them. Now, from those of us that are from Livingston County and Fayette County and Hancock County, we don't quite have the same as those in Cook County. And we don't have Rahm Emanuel as our mayor. Thank God. I heard you say that, young man. I appreciate you. Congratulations on the effort that just happened with regards to concealed carry. I've been supportive of this for a number of years, both in the State House and the State Senate. I didn't have a chance to vote on it this time. I'd left to become a part of the executive branch of government. But I want you to know that I supported it. Let me also tell you up front candidly, I was asked in a debate in the Chicagoland area, have I applied for my concealed carry? True confession, since the law went into effect, I'm kind of busy recently. Kind of busy running for governor. I haven't had a chance to do it, but I'm looking in the eye right now. Once I have that break, in fact, I talked to the instructor from Deer Creek a little bit ago. I'm going to be applying and getting my training. And another reporter asked me last night, will you carry? I looked that reporter right in the eye and I said, you bet I will. Senator Ryder mentioned the office of governor. There is nothing more important than making sure we change the governor's office. And I will tell you one more thing. I've got a couple of my friends, in fact, they're sitting up here on the stage with me today that are running, and any one of them will be a good governor. I just happen to think I'd be a better one. But I'll tell you what, we don't need that billionaire from Chicago to go buy himself a Republican nomination for governor. What do you think? Thank you for being in the capital city. I'll be back for years 9, 10, 11, and 12, my first 4 years as your governor. Thank you very much.
This next gentleman grew up in Bloomington, Illinois, where he played football and was a champion wrestler. He has served a large part of Central Illinois in both the Illinois House and Senate. Winning 98 of the 102 counties in the state, he was the Republican nominee for governor in 2010. I'm proud to introduce gubernatorial candidate, the Honorable Bill Brady.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is great to see you in Springfield once again. It's great to be with you. And thank you for your support in bringing Illinois citizens concealed carry. Give yourselves a round of applause. You know, on my lapel, I have an American flag. I wear that because I'm proud to be an American. And I'm proud to be a supporter of the Constitution of the United States of America. There's a whole host of rights in that Constitution and Bill of Rights. One that we're here today to support, which is the Second Amendment of the Constitution. Rights that we are given by our country. Rights that we must constantly defend. And I know you agree with me. We can't trust those rights to Rahm Emanuel, Pat Quinn, and Barack Obama. Am I right? Ladies and gentlemen, we need someone who will support us in the office of governor on all of our rights, and particularly the Second Amendment. I'm the only candidate for governor on this stage that has a 100% lifetime voting record with the NRA and the Illinois State Rifle Association. You either believe in the fact that law-abiding citizens ought to have the full protection of their Second Amendment, or you don't. I happen to believe that we've got enough gun laws, that we don't need any more restrictions on our Second Amendment rights in terms of gun ownership when it comes to law-abiding citizens. How about you? Now, we've got a big choice about who's going to be the representative of the Republican Party and go on to beat Pat Quinn. I'm sorry to tell you that in a recent Associated Press survey, both Bruce Rauner and my friend Kirk Dillard said that they would be open to discussing with the Democrats a limitation on gun ownership by law-abiding citizens. Dan Rutherford and Bill Brady said no, we're not going to restrict gun ownership rights on the behalf of law-abiding citizens. In fact, Kirk Dillard the other day said he thought the federal government ought to decide what assault weapons are and whether they be limited. Do you believe that Barack Obama ought to have the right to limit law-abiding citizens' gun ownership? No. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to ask for your support once again. With your help, we won 98 counties of 102, and with your help, God willing, we'll win all 102 counties. Nominate me for governor. We'll go on to win and protect your Second Amendment rights. Thank you, and God bless you.
This next gentleman was born and raised in Illinois and resides in Hinsdale. He serves as Chief of Staff to former Governor Jim Edgar, first sworn in as Senator to the General Assembly in 1995, and was appointed in 2013 to serve as Assistant Senate Republican Leader. Please help me welcome gubernatorial candidate, the Honorable Kirk Dillard.
Thank you. Thank you. It is great to be here today. You know, I started reading Field and Stream when I was about 5 years old, reading my grandpa's copies, and it is great to be here with all of you today. I am State Senator Kirk Dillard, running for governor, and I'm here with my Lieutenant Governor running mate, Jill Tracy from Quincy, Illinois, who grew up in Southern Illinois. You know, we have been campaigning throughout this state up and down. And Jill Tracy and I have incredibly strong Second Amendment legislative records that we are proud of. But I bet you one thing you didn't know about Jill Tracy is she can fire a Glock pretty doggone well. And Jill is an avid hunter coming from southwestern Illinois. And then I'm married to my wife Stephanie, who grew up in Wisconsin. And long before Sarah Palin knew how to cull a moose, my wife as a little girl in Wisconsin was culling deer. And we are a proud hunting and outdoor and protector of the Second Amendment team that's running for governor. I'm very proud of the fact that I was the first sponsor in the state Senate back in the mid-1990s of concealed carry, long before it was fashionable, long before it was cool. I sponsored concealed carry. So I want to say congratulations to Richard Pearson, Don Moran, but a real special thank you and just a congratulations to two people that actually live in my Senate district or did when this started. The first is Todd Vandermeide. Todd, I can't tell you how happy I am for you. And Jim Van Opel, my longtime friend and supporter. Well done, Jim. Very well done. And to Senator Ryder and Brendan Phelps, we do things in a bipartisan way. You know, Senator Phelps is a Southern Illinois Democrat, and way to go, Brendan. I'm glad we got the ball over the line, and it's so good to have some of you get those cards in the mail over the weekend. I will also tell you, this is your day, and I thank you. Like Treasurer Rutherford, I have been with you for the last 8 or 9 years all the time, and there's no day that fills me better than when I see all of you over in the state capitol. And that's why this day is so important. You got to be vigilant. You can never go back to sleep. You still got Rahm Emanuel as the mayor of Chicago, and you got Pat Quinn in the governor's office, and those guys every day want to take away your rights. Now, I know that Senator Brady's fighting a cold and maybe the flu, but I don't know if he's read any of these surveys very well. You know, he always loves to make up our record, but I will tell you, as the Republican spokesman of the Judiciary Committee, I've been fighting an assault weapon ban and an all-gun ban as long as I've ever been a member of the legislature, and will continue to do it as your governor as well. Jill and I got the scars to prove it. But you know what? The Democrats every day want to take away your rights. And I want to tell you about our Second Amendment record, Jill's and mine, because we're proud of it. It's a track record that you can bank on, and don't get hoodwinked by these guys. You know, all of the guys running for governor are my friends. And I want to give you a couple of facts. These are not attacks, but facts. You know, Bill Brady was the only member of the state Senate that did not vote for the money to implement concealed carry. So Billy's got amnesia when it comes to his record on guns. And for those of you who had that nice surprise on Saturday or Monday morning, that wouldn't have come if Bill Brady had his way. And then the other guys touched on it, but let's talk about Bruce Rauner, Who is Bruce Rauner, the billionaire from Chicago, the man that made Rahm Emanuel rich when he left the Clinton White House, who vacations? He vacations with Rahm Emanuel. And Bruce Rauner has said that Michael Bloomberg, that mayor of New York, is one of his heroes. So I'm going to warn you right now, Bruce Rauner, Rahm Emanuel, Mayor Bloomberg, all of those guys are tied at the hips, and you cannot trust them with your Second Amendment rights. So thank you. You know, march on over to the Capitol, talk to Jill's and my colleagues, because they're not all of the mindset like we are, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you enough for doing what you do day in and day out, and I'm proudly the first sponsor of concealed carry, and I congratulate you because it wouldn't have gotten done without all of you. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Brandon Phelps serves as a state representative of the 118th District. He is the chairperson of the Public Utilities Committee, serves on a member of many committees, including Appropriations for Higher Education, Energy, Environment, Healthcare Licenses, Labor and Commerce, Public Safety, Police and Fire, Veterans Affairs. He serves on the Executive Council of the National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucuses and is only one of the 10 in the nation to do so. He is a consistent fighter for the rights of Illinois sportsmen, and he is the chief sponsor of the new Illinois concealed carry legislation. The Honorable Brandon W. Phelps.
Quit it. Quit it. I love you. I love you guys. You're going to make me tear up. You know how I am. Very emotional. Never did I ever think this day would come. And I'm so honored to have traveled this journey with all of you. Because if it wasn't for you all, this would have never been done. Otis McDonald, I love you. Mary Shepard, I love you. Todd Vandermeide, I love you. Rich Pearson, I love you. Jim Van Opel, I love you. Mike, Valinda Rowe, I love you. And everybody, I love you. This day, I never ever thought would ever come. We did it. But let me just tell you now, as the chief sponsor, the fight's not over. There are a lot of people on my side of the aisle that want to take those rights away. And it's very important to me to beat that down. And I can't do it without my Republican counterparts like Jill Tracy and Kirk Dillard. I cannot do it. I want to set the record straight on a few other things, though, because I've talked to many of you around this state. When I say the fight's not over, I mean that. I know a lot of you have expressed interest about how much the fee was. Ladies and gentlemen, at one time, the fee was going to be $1,000 a year. We got it down to $150 for 5 years. That's $30 a year for 5 years. To me, that is a cheap price to be able to protect yourself and your family. Hours. A lot of you have expressed to me, think the hours are too much. I agree with you. But at one time, it was going to be over 40 hours. We got it down to 16 with 8 for veterans, 4 for Utah, 4 for hunter safety to get that credit. Reciprocity, I've got Utah myself. I can't wait. We're going to keep fighting for that. Yes, and there's too many restrictions. But sometimes you got to crawl before you can walk. And never would I ever thought in Illinois we would see concealed carry. But ladies and gentlemen, I am glad and honored to be part of this. We got it. They can try to take it away, but they're never going to be able to do it because of people like you. So I'm with you. I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to keep fighting the fight. But I want to say one more thing. Thank you again for all what you do and for being here today. Go see those Chicago's legislators and make sure they know we're here to stay. I love you. See y'all.
This lady is the iGold coordinator. She is a spokesperson for Illinois Carry and a recipient of the Grassroots Activist of the Year Award given by the Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms. Ladies and gentlemen, Belinda Rowe.
For those of you that have been to iGold before, you may recognize what these are. My tactical rat tail comb self-defense tool and my tactical self-defense tongue depressor for when the state governor wanted us to gag ourselves and force ourselves to throw up in order to protect ourselves. It's some convoluted thing. I just want you to know that I am retiring these two things today. I've traded them in for my Illinois concealed carry license and a 9mm. Unfortunately, though, as all the speakers have said before, this fight is not over. There are the list of 23 prohibited places. Our fight for the right to protect ourselves and our families continues. We will still not be able to carry everywhere that we need to carry and should have a right to carry. Women all over this state will still be victims of violent crime on mass transportation, at bus stops, at train platforms, walking to and from their vehicles to take advantage of that transportation, or if that is their only transportation. City parks. Some of the most dangerous parks in our state are the city parks where the gangs take over and hold for their own territory, where they group up at night or in the afternoons, and families can't go there to enjoy the city parks. One of the places that families need most in Chicago is mass transportation and the city parks. They need to be able to carry there. Going to and from public gatherings, the library, museums, going to and from the parking lots from all those restricted places. We have legislators who want to roll the tide back and take the freedom of choice away from our churches. Mary Shepard, our friend and loved one, Mary Shepard, beaten and left for dead in her church by a paroled felon. She went to court. She won her right back to protect herself in that situation. And now Senator Dan Katowski wants to strip her of that right all over again and ban concealed carry in churches. If you get a chance today, after you visit your own legislator, feel free to drop a note or stop by Senator Dan Katowski's office and say, your churches already have the right to ban carry if they want to. Stay out of our district. Today, we want to send a message to Dan Katowski and others like him that gun-free zones are killing zones. They are fantasy lands where we draw imaginary circles around ourselves and pretend like violent criminals and the criminally and violent insane cannot get in there and hurt good, innocent people. They are those zones the very same individuals choose and select to commit their murder and their mayhem and their destruction because they know in those zones they will face the least resistance of any place in this state. Gun-free zones are killing zones. And the sooner our legislators, Speaker Madigan, President of the Senate John Cullerton, understand that, the sooner we can put the right definition on shall not be infringed. At 3 p.m. today, we're going to do something different. We've never done this before, but we're going to rally in the rotunda on the first floor at 3 p.m. We want as many of you to come back to the rotunda at that time. Fill up that bottom floor. If there's not enough room, go up the stairs to the next level and gather around the rail. And if you have to, go up to the next. Now, you may not be able to hear the speakers real well up there, but you've got an important role to play, and it's important for you to be there. Once we do that, we're going to send an important message at the conclusion of that rally. We want to raise the rafters with the message that gun-free zones are killing zones. We're going to do this. We're going to do this for 1 full minute, long enough to get the message across, not long enough to get thrown out. Okay? All right. So I want to practice through that. I want you to join with me. Gun-free zones are killing zones. Gun-free zones are killing zones. Gun-free zones are killing zones. You've got it. That's beautiful. 3 o'clock in the rotunda. Meet me there.
This next gentleman was elected to the Senate in 1993 and has been a strong supporter of Second Amendment rights ever since. Please welcome the Honorable Dave Severson.
Thank you very much. It is great to join you today. I'm going to be brief because we want to hear from Todd and then get back to the Capitol and get you over to the Capitol as well. But I've enjoyed coming here every year, and it's great to have someone that represents Northern Illinois come and be here, and in fact representing an urban area like Rockford, coming here to talk to you about and thanking you for your support for what you've done over these years. I do want to give a shout out to those from Winnebago and Boone and DeKalb and Kane County that we represent, and thank you for your support of this important legislation. I'm proud to have a lifetime perfect record with the NRA and with the Illinois Rifle Association. I'm proud to work with great men like Richard and Todd, those who are fighting for you every single day down here and making a difference. Good government happens when people get involved in the process. Bad government happens when you get complacent. You're not getting complacent because you're here every year, and for that we are grateful. I just want to wrap it up and follow up with what Representative Brandon Phelps said. You know, our job will be a lot easier if we elect a pro-Second Amendment governor, elect someone who supports our issues, those like Senator Dillard and Representative Tracy. So this election day is crucial. Please get out and vote. Get your friends and neighbors to vote. This is our future. Thank you so much for being here. God bless you.
This man has been an effective lobbyist for the National Rifle Association for many years and was instrumental in the recent Illinois concealed carry legislation. Please welcome Todd Vandermeide.
Good afternoon, gun lobby. Kind of funny, last night, right around the corner from here is a little place called Saputo's. And a bunch of us got together last night, and I got to eat in the safest restaurant in Springfield. Just so happens, I think there are about 15 guns between the two tables that nobody saw. I don't know how it made some of the city guys who were in there having dinner feel that night, but I know how it felt for me. But, you know, it's kind of interesting. Here we are, 5 full days past the time that an Illinois resident opened up their mailbox and got their concealed carry license and put it in their hand and put a gun on their hip. And the streets are only covered in snow and salt. Who'd have thunk? And what we need to do is think about some of the gains that we've made. It's not a perfect bill. Some people might not even say it's a great bill. But let's look at what the other side lost last year. They lost on the issue of preemption when it comes to transporting firearms anywhere in the state. They can no longer create absurd and arcane type of rules that you have to break down the gun and it can't be anywhere close to you in your vehicle and it has to be in a case and all those other things. We got preemption for a number of issues, the first one being transportation. For the first time in 60 years, a Chicago resident no longer has to go down to City Hall and register any of their firearms. The work that Otis McDonald, David, and Colleen Lawson started in that lawsuit, we finished with a piece of legislation that said they cannot regulate handguns. Not that they can't say something about it, they cannot regulate, register handguns, their ammunition, and that it is an exclusive jurisdiction of the state. And that stung. Not only that, but they can no more put regulations on licensees when we carry. They wanted a carve out for Chicago, they didn't get it. They wanted a carve out for Cook County, they didn't get it. They wanted special rules for those places, they didn't get it. So now, today, it's legal for anyone with a carry permit to carry their handgun in the manner they choose, concealed upon their person, in their vehicle, through the city of Chicago. And the superintendent's having a hissy fit on a regular basis. And I think it is safe to report that Superintendent Mr. McStreetlights, none of our people have shot any. But the funny thing that really seems to be driving them nuts are these little signs that you see creeping up in places saying no handgun carrying allowed. And it's just utter, I couldn't figure out what it was at first. It's a sign. You wanted these places prohibited. You should be happy that there are these places that are prohibited. That's what you want. But then I heard from one of the mom's people who talked about it in a TV interview that their small child, when they go into preschool, kept pointing to the sun and asking about the gun sign. And then it dawned on me. It's a reminder every single day, every time they go past one of these places, they lost. Every time they turn around, they have to consciously think. And they see it that it's a reminder that we won the legislative fight, we won the court fight, and now they have to work overtime to try to find ways to get other places added to the list and cajole businesses. Kind of amazing that just yesterday Staples threw them out of their corporate headquarters because they didn't want to hear their nonsense. And you've heard some of the other speakers talk about we're not done yet. No, we're not done yet because we have there are three fronts that we fight on. But the first one comes up on the 18th, and that's elections. And we've got some friends that have gone out of their way to help us and stand up for all of us in this fight this last year. And they're in some tough primaries. And it's not over our issues. It's over other issues. But when I go into that voting booth, you know, the Second Amendment is tops on my list to vote. And so we need to reelect guys like Dennis Roboletti, Ron Sandak, John Anthony, Eddie Sullivan, Jeannie Ives, and Sue Shearer. They're our friends. And now they helped us last year. They stood up for us. 30-some-odd votes in the House dealing with, you know, issues on concealed carry and every archaic and stupid idea that could be mustered out of the city of Chicago. We fought, and they fought with us. But now, between now and the 18th, they need our help. And our job and my job in protecting all of you is a lot easier when they're here to help me. And so I would ask you, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to the people that live in those districts, and make sure they get out and vote for those candidates. Now, we're not done. We're going to come back, and we filed a bunch of bills. They thought they could file bills. They saw how many bills we could file. And we're just getting warmed up here. And we're going to keep pushing back on all of these restrictions. We're going to keep pushing back on mass transit bans. We're going to keep pushing back on bans in public parks. We're going to keep pushing back on the fees, the hours of training, and all the things that they think, you know, that we think are impediments and hurdles to the process. But then all of a sudden they decided they were going to go in a different direction. And they were going to sit there and introduce a bill to force us to register every firearm we own. and they lit a fuse here. They lit a fuse with a lot of people. But what's kind of interesting is the law of unintended consequences. Because while they thought it was cute, or let's try the Chicago-style bill, some of our brethren over in Connecticut were getting a taste of just exactly what that means. They passed a semi-auto ban in Connecticut, and they said that you could only keep your existing gun, it fit that definition, if you registered it. Funny thing happened on the way to the implementation. They estimated they needed 375,000 firearms to be registered, close to 2 million magazines. They got registrations for about 50,000 magazines and 38,000 guns. Somewhere they can't account for about 325,000 firearms that should be registered. And it's only about registration until it's about confiscation, because now we see newspapers in Connecticut calling for them to use the background check records to go door to door to force compliance upon these individuals who one day were an honest average citizen and the next day could be facing a felony and 5 years in the penitentiary. Funny thing, it's never about gun control and confiscation until all of a sudden it's about gun control and confiscation. And to those individuals, Josh Sugarman, our friends at the VPC and Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, they keep telling us that gun owners are on a declining trend. There's fewer and fewer of them. I don't know. I was the first one in my family to become a gun owner. I've got a 14-year-old son shooting practical rifle and running around with an AR-15, kicking down doors and having fun at the range. I got a 10-year-old that we're going to bring into the family, so I'm going to double what came to me. But with this, because they are our future. And what kind of drives them all nuts is that while they keep saying we're a dying breed, funny thing happened since Barack Obama took president. FOID cards went from 1.2 million to 1.67 million in the last few years. That's a 33% increase in gun owners in a state like Illinois. We're not Texas. We're not Wyoming or Arizona, but I think a 33% increase in gun owners in the state are pretty good. And what we can't get through the legislature, we'll go back to court. It seems kind of funny, the city of Chicago has paid our lawyers over $2 million in attorney's fees so far. I had the pleasure of reminding them at a city council hearing on some of their new ordinances of that fact. And I'd like to remind the aldermen that are listening again today, I'm told the fees in the Ezell case could be running into the $1 million figure that you haven't settled yet. In the case that started off as Benson, we're over $500,000. So you seem to think that you have millions of dollars of taxpayer money to fritter away. Okay, you're going to be sending our lawyers' grandchildren to Harvard to come back and fight you again. And in case they've forgotten, McDonald, Ezell, Gowder, Moore, Shepard, Benson. That is just the beginning of the roll call of Second Amendment cases we have won in the federal courts here in the state of Illinois. We're 5 for 5 at the state Supreme Court. Diggins, Aguilar, others. And there's more to come. So you can either pay attention to what the courts have said. If you want to continue to thumb the municipal nose at the courts, sooner or later they're going to get about as cranky as we are. We're not going to give up. We're not going to go away. And if you think Illinois gun owners are going to roll over and you're going to make us the next Connecticut, the next New York, or the next Maryland, we've got a big news for you. With that, God bless, and I'll see you at the Capitol.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members, Leaders in business, education, law, medicine, and other fields from across Illinois.
Hi, I'm Jim Nolan, Senior Fellow at the University of Illinois Institute of Government and Public Affairs and Director of the Illinois Integrity Initiative. Over my career, I've served as a state representative, worked as a senior aide to 3 governors, and had the opportunity to run state agencies. I know that the overwhelming majority of those who serve in Illinois government are good, honest, hardworking individuals. But there's no doubt that public corruption in Illinois has tainted our state's reputation. Unfortunately, public corruption is all too real. Our research shows, for example, that the Chicago area is the most corrupt in the nation, and Illinois now ranks 3rd in the nation for the number of convictions of public officials. The point of the Illinois Integrity Initiative is to address this culture of corruption that exists in Illinois. We plan to study why it exists and how to change it. And by working with the Illinois Channel, we look to keep citizens across the state informed of our research, public events, and our progress. And I urge you to be involved in demanding higher standards among those who serve in government. It's time for this culture of corruption in Illinois to end. Our Integrity Initiative is a beginning towards that end. But corruption in Illinois will only be stopped when all the good people in Illinois demand more of those in government. Through the Illinois Channel's coverage of our events, we hope you'll follow our efforts to restore Illinois' reputation as a state with a high level of integrity in our public affairs. I'm Jim Nolan, Director of the Illinois Integrity Initiative. I'm also proud to say I serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.